yoga therapist, breath coach, and an official Wim Hof Method instructor. Our guest today on the Settle or Be Better podcast is Mr. Isaac Mullins, who's going to be talking to us about breath work, cold exposure, mindfulness, and a lot more. So, welcome, Mr. Isaac, and over to you. Why don't you begin by telling us a little bit about your personal health and wellness story?
Thank you. My own story. Well, I guess I've been working with the body since I was about 11. I started in the Royal Ballet School, and then I became a professional ballet dancer and with the Royal Ballet Company and the Spanish National Ballet. But at the same time, I started practicing yoga when I was 17 because, I was suffering post-traumatic stress disorder. And it was very difficult for me to relax into dance. So although I was very athletic and enjoyed that aspect of it, I was unable to connect with the flow of movement because I had too much tension, too much stress in the body. So I started yoga in order to facilitate that loosening up of tension, which then, took me through to the end of my professional dance career around 28, when I decided to go to India and study yoga with some different teachers, some Indian teachers. Wanted to go to the home of yoga, spent a year studying yoga, and then I got sick for about 6 years, which drove me into interest in nutrition, finding out how I could heal my body through food, which previous to getting sick, I really had no idea about. And it was news to me that if I only ate ciabattas and, fast food, that I was going to get sick. Actually had no idea about it, even though I was studying yoga and various other health modalities. Nutrition meant nothing to me. So that illness took me into nutrition, and then I realized I need to keep the inflammation down in the body, and then Wim Hof, and then Buteku breathing, and really the breath has been my center point of focus for the last years. Yeah, in a nutshell.
Amazing. That's a lovely story. I mean, wow, I didn't know that you have a ballet background. So that's really very interesting to know. How was this transition like from ballet to yoga and then, incorporating the Wim Hof method, like, mentally, emotionally, how was this transition like?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because obviously both are working with the body and potentially to quite an extreme level. And I was an elite athlete. I mean, a ballet dancer, a professional ballet dancer is probably it's said to be the strongest profession in the world in terms of all over musculoskeletal strength and flexibility. But it has a profoundly different effect on the psychophysical state that yoga does. Why that is a huge conversation, which we'd have to delve into the metaphysics of yoga, including, the chakra system, the pranic body, etc., etc. But it's not really necessary to know those energetic maps in order to experience the benefits of yoga as opposed to something like dance. It's a completely different effect it has on the mind and body. So that was very evident when I took up yoga at the same time as dance. One made me feel profoundly relaxed and centered, and the other one made me feel, I guess, more egoic and more competitive and more in the sympathetic nervous system, so the fight-flight response. And then the Wim Hof method came in later when I heard him talking about, it was about 10 years ago, talking about the effect that his method could have on people with multiple sclerosis and autoimmune disorders and depression and anxiety, which, although I was quite a happy person because I've been doing a lot of yoga, I felt like there was still room for improvement. Living in London with a lot of pressures, so I tried his breathing, and immediately I felt a reset of the nervous system, and used it quite a lot at first. And then that eventually brought me into more interest into Buteyko breathing and functional breathing. So where the Wim Hof breath is like a reset for the nervous system and physiology. The Buteyko and the functional breathing, just essentially how we breathe all day, is more of a down regulation of the nervous system. So finding balance all day long, using the breath and the body as a modality in which to stay centered in the present moment.
Amazing. Yeah. That was really interesting to know.
Well, there's also, I saw, you're a personal trainer, right, and a coach, and the functional breathing is really, really important for functional movement and the optimization of endurance as well, which is another aspect of the breathwork.
Absolutely. And, like the Wim Hof method has gained a lot of popularity lately for all the right reasons. And a lot of people know that there are two major aspects to it, or three, I would say: the breath work, cold exposure, and the power of your mind, right? But as you are a yoga therapist, and breath work is also a very important part of yoga. What was the change like what was the difference between the breath work that you were doing in yoga to compare to what you learned with the Wim Hof method?
It's a good question. There are actually very similar breath techniques in the yoga tradition, almost identical. So, for example, Bhastrika breath, it's the same intentional stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system, followed by a breath retention of the stimulation of the vagus nerve, the slowing down of the heart rate, and the stimulation of the parasympathetic nervous system. So I would say these methods are found already in the yogic tradition. So I was already familiar with it. What I wasn't familiar with was the cold exposure aspect of the Wim Hof method. But again, it's an ancient technique and thousands of years old, these techniques. What the Wim Hof method have done have taken these things and packaged them and made it available to the general public. But the actual techniques inside it belong to nobody, and they're ancient. So I was already familiar with most of them through yoga therapy and yoga practices.
Lovely. That's good to know, because there's so much confusion with all the options available when it comes to breath work alone. Like that so many of these different methods or these guided breathing practices that one can follow, and there's this whole confusion about which one to go for and which one not. So that really, explains a lot of it about us. So moving on to cold exposure and the Wim Hof method. So where does a beginner, what's a good place for a beginner to start with the Wim Hof method, and how does one gradually progress along with it?
Well, cold showers, if it's possible in India, I don't know, depends where you are and what time of the year, but you only need less than 16 degrees to have some effect on your physiology. And actually, I know from being in India, for some reason, because it's so warm, even taking a lukewarm or coldish shower is still a bit of a challenge. So cold showers is really where you can start, and just by starting off with 30 seconds at the end of every cold shower, and then slowly building up. And you only really need 2 to 3 minutes to get many of the physiological benefits. Yeah, and then in terms of the Wim Hof method specifically, there's obviously the online courses which you can have a look at, which are very good. I highly recommend those.
Absolutely. Understood. And so, what is your philosophy in terms of the mind and body connection? Because you've had this amazing background of, going through so many different movement modalities. So how has your philosophy of the mind and body connection changed over the years? And what is it that you personally, teach in your practice and in your trainings?
That's a great question. Well, I guess it's changed in many aspects. I used to be very, very disciplined with my kind of physical yoga practice every morning, like this. And it was very important. It's like a medicine for me, especially someone suffering from post-traumatic stress. I really had to do it every day in order to remain stable and balanced. But I guess over the years, what's become more apparent to me is it's more important to be aware of my breathing and my body all day, as opposed to just like for an hour in the morning and then done and then get on with the rest of the day. No, it's actually a much more enjoyable experience of living when you're aware of how you're breathing all day. Is my breath diaphragmatic? Is it slow? Is it gentle? And I guess as well that has, in relation to how I teach yoga, I've definitely changed my approach of how I instruct breathing and how I practice breathing in my own yoga practice, which is to make it very light and very gentle. So you don't even disturb the fine hairs in the nostrils, to keep it diaphragmatic so that you hardly notice the movement of the breath. And when I used to teach yoga, it would be like, inhale deeply and exhale and in. But actually, this is not really, I've looked into this a lot. In fact, I've spent my whole life researching the breath. And this is not conducive to good mental and physical health. It can stimulate us and give us a temporary boost, but ultimately it will lead to an imbalance in the system. So my main the main change in my approach has been to soften the breath, to make the breath more gentle, to make it slower and easy, light and low in the body. And this is backed up heavily by research in terms of how it affects our nervous system, how it affects the release of oxygen from the hemoglobin. We can talk on and on about the physiological processes that are affected through the way we breathe, and also obviously the calmness of the mind and the ability to focus.
Absolutely, and that's a really interesting learning you pointed out. About being aware of the way you breathe or you carry yourself throughout the day. Because when it comes to any sort of practice, any sort of a workout, or maybe any other kind of yoga practice that one does, what usually happens is we tend to focus on that 1 hour of practice that we do in the morning, or whatever time, and then it's done. Then we go back to the similar routine and the similar state of mind where we are constantly in a fight or flight mode with the stress and work and our personal lives, and we forget the practice that happens for that 1 hour, and then we go on with our day. But it really matters more that what you do throughout the day, and not just that 1 hour of the day that you're scheduling it. So it's really an interesting insight, because that's something that we all need to be conscious about. And it's not something that happens easily, but definitely with some thought, it would be made easier. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And coming back to cold exposure, there are so many of these doubts that people have, because now there are so many options available, and people have started embracing the ice cold baths, because like the ice pod that we have, all of these resources available. There are many people who are being able to do ice baths even in India, but there's this whole confusion about, are we supposed to stay still in a cold bath? And how are we supposed to breathe? Are we supposed to move around? Because there are a lot of these new studies also showing us that we should be moving around also in an ice, which sort of increases the, I don't know, like the challenging level of the ice bath in some way. But what would be the right way to go about it? And of course, for a beginner as well, how can one progress in their ice baths?
Well, progression in terms of ice baths, I mean, we have to ask, like, why are we doing it? Like, what? I don't know what progression looks like. Like, the ice bath it's actually, I don't want to belittle it, it's actually profound, especially for the ability to overcome one's reactivity towards stressful environments. So it's a really profound practice to retrain the nervous system in that way. So I guess if we're talking about progression, it would be the ability to remain calm in a stressful situation. And there's all the physiological benefits, which, we can talk about again till the cows come home, as we say. Whether you move or be still, to be honest, I've never heard arguments for either of those. I like to be still because the ice bath is a meditation for me. It's an opportunity to really come into the body. So for me, there are two main tools we have at our disposal in order to bring ourselves out of a stress response and into the present moment, and that's the breath and the body. And so when we come into the ice bath, it's an opportunity, instead of like taking our mind somewhere else and distracting ourselves or forcing our way through, really the opportunity is there to let go of tension and resistance to what is quite a fierce force coming on to the body. And there you can use your breathing in through the nose and relaxing as you exhale through the mouth. Long exhalation. Because if we lengthen the exhale to the inhale, we're going to intentionally activate our parasympathetic nervous system. And so because we're coming into a environment which is normally stimulating the sympathetic nervous system, the freezing cold, we don't want to do any kind of breathing which is going to also stimulate the sympathetic nervous system in the body. So we do the opposite. We find something which is parasympathetic, which is simply long exhalation. In through the nose, long exhale. Nasal breathing is essential. Diaphragmatic breathing is essential. And doubling, if you like, the exhale to the inhale, or at least lengthening the exhale to the inhale. All of those things will stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that you do in your retreats as well, right? Do it in natural water.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. It's all about getting into the nature, getting into the mountains, getting into the cold natural water, and and connecting with the water in that way. It's a very different experience and much, much more fruitful.
Absolutely. And for the ones who don't know, definitely go follow Mr. Isaac. The details in the description below. You can see the amazing retreats or trainings that he's conducting, and they look just beautiful and some really amazing experiences that we should definitely go for. And I mean, truly said that when it's done in nature versus when you're doing it at home, in an ice pod, it's really different. And at least once we should get to experience that in life. So thank you for hosting these retreats, and even I hope to be a part of them very soon.
Oh, yeah, please come. And thanks for the plug.
Absolutely. And you have been a Wim Hof Method instructor. You have, trained people, guided them through this method, and you've seen them, get into the cold and also take on this practice throughout their lives later on. What are some of the, stories that or experiences that have stood out for you in terms of any sort of disease one has been able to overcome or, fight better, become more stronger in terms of their physiology and their mental state?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing what the Wim Hof Method and other forms of breath work, it's amazing to see how it has helped people overcome their depression, their anxiety. I've seen people come off all the pharmaceutical medications in terms of depression and anxiety, gone. No need. I've seen people who were on so much medication they were like obese and numb. And mainly actually the cold exposure has really helped those people, the ones I'm thinking of at the moment. And the main thing they report is that when they get into really cold water really takes your breath away. It's the first time they felt their mind become still. Because, today it's very difficult. Our minds are so distracted. Most people's nervous systems are so traumatized. It's very, very difficult to still the mind through practice of meditation, like a top-down practice. So using a practice like really cold water, which is a body-first practice. So we put the body in a situation and the mind follows. It can't help but become still because of the change in physiology. And so that's been incredible to see, is people suicidal on so much antidepressants they can't move, come completely off. And now they're fulfilling their potential. They're stood there and handsome, beautiful people, a good weight, healthy metabolism, everything's working in balance again. I've seen people with multiple sclerosis unable to walk, and then 4 days later, after just doing ice baths and breathing, they're walking fine, almost completely normally. I've seen people with cancer. I teach on cancer retreats sometimes, and I've seen they've reported an increase in white blood cells and red blood cells also. But for a lymphoma patient, that's quite something. And I've also seen, perhaps even more relevant, because we can never say these things cure cancer, obviously, but these are just testimonies. I've seen people for the first time with stage 4 cancer, like terminal diagnosis, suddenly have a change of mind in the breathwork, and suddenly they believe they can heal. And then 3 years later, after a terminal diagnosis of 3 months, 3 years later, they're still alive. So we can never say why, causation, causality, blah, blah, blah. But nevertheless, I've seen these incredible transformations of psychology and physiology. Too many to mention them all, but even a simple thing like a guy with a frozen shoulder, the doctor told him he's unable to lift his arm higher than 90 degrees, and then 3 days of breath work and he's got full mobility. Probably just the freeing up of the peripheral nervous system through breathing and the freeing up of the spine. So incredible things. Then there's all like small things like lower back pains and aches and pains in the body, and yeah.
Amazing. That was some really interesting stories. I mean, when you hear these, major changes, transitions that people are going through in terms of their health with these practices, you really get to thinking that, what amazing things could happen to me if, I'm really in a good health state right now. But even if I start doing it right now, what peak performances can I reach in my life? So that's really interesting way to think about it. So thank you for sharing these stories with us. I'm sure this is going to motivate a lot of our listeners to also, brave the cold and take that step. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and just wherever you are in your life, like no matter how you're feeling, if you can start to get into awareness of your breathing, it's going to change your whole neurology. It's going to change your whole physiology, because through bringing, out the 50,000 thoughts that we have every single day, most of us, 95% of them we had the day before, they're repetitive. Okay, and just by starting to bring your awareness to your natural breath and focusing on how you're breathing during the day, you're actually reducing the size of your amygdala. Your amygdala is your fear response. So you're actually taking away power from that kind of center of anxiety and reducing it. And the aspects of your brain that are responsible for reasoning and sensory processing are increasing through bringing your awareness to your breath again and again. So even if you feel like, I tried to bring my awareness to my breath and my mind's just straight, it doesn't matter. Just keep bringing your attention to your breathing during the day. Keep bringing it to the body, because what starts to happen is you start to feel your way through life instead of thinking your way through life. And this means that your attention span increases. This means that you're having a body-centered existence. It means that you're living in the present moment in its entirety, with all the feelings, with all the nervous system alive. You're waking up the body. And this is how we can live, instead of like trapped in this sort of like box of thinking, which is a very painful way of existence. I've been there. And all you have to do is just simply become aware of your breathing, start to cultivate and change your breath so that it becomes more gentle, more diaphragmatic. You get all the physiological benefits and all the psychological benefits, and they'll start happening immediately. So wherever you are in your life, I highly recommend you just reach out to somebody who can help you with your breathing.
Absolutely. And, that's very insightful, because a lot of people don't realize how they are breathing shallow day in and out. Like, we don't realize that. And even if I'm sure that, people have this busy schedule and they might not be able to take out that 1 hour for exercise every day, or, like even do a cold ice bath because, also of the economical reasons, they might not have these things available to them and all. But do you think that the best thing that they can begin with is the breathwork practice? I mean, I feel like that's the easiest resource available to you. And, there's no excuse about it that, I don't have the time or I don't have the money, because it's really available to us so easily right now, and it doesn't even take us that much time. So even if we can schedule, took out like 5 or 10 minutes for us every day, starting there, do you think that it's going to be also giving us some benefits?
Yeah, it's going to be giving you all the benefits you need. You don't need to do ice baths. I mean, you don't need to do, there's plenty of opportunities for hormesis. And hormesis is simply the application of a stressor in order to create strength. You don't have to use an ice bath for that. You live in India, for example, you've got the most powerful hormetic tool at your disposal, which is the sun. Like, start to find ways to work out in the hot sun carefully and slowly and gradually. But there's many ways you can produce the same hormetic response as you would get from an ice bath just by using the heat of the sun, for example. But yeah, firstly, always begin with the breath, because the breath is, whichever way you look at it, the breath is the most powerful tool you have at your disposal for your own physiological and psychological health. There's nothing comes close. Obviously, you've got to take food, and there you can also. And interestingly, the approach to breathing is potentially the same approach we should have to eating, which is fasting. Like, we shouldn't be taking in deep breaths and being greedy with the breath during the day. No, that's going to lower the oxygen levels in the brain. And it's the same with food, right? We think it's not always about what you put in and how much you can put in, but often about what you don't put in. And given, because the body's intelligence is there, it knows exactly what to do. In order to create an optimal environment for it to heal, you just have to actually give less breath, slower breath, more gentle breath, give less food, more high quality food, eat in restricted time window. And so we don't need ice baths. And I say that because a part of me is feeling a little bit bad about promoting ice baths in India, because there's a lot of plastic often involved in ice cubes and then throwing away all these plastic things. There are great ice factories in India, actually, which I haven't found anywhere else, which produce these big blocks and just deliver them in vans. So if you can get those and break them up, much better than using the stuff wrapped in plastic.
True, true. That happens a lot. I mean, for me also, like if I have to arrange for ice, easiest way that it comes in is the plastic bag. So definitely, that's a very great insight. That was a lovely reference about fasting and, breath work, because that's really very interesting that you put it that way. And I'm sure that would help a lot of our listeners to put that perspective into picture. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
I've seen you talk about something really interesting is, how cold exposure or how some sort of workout is really us putting ourselves in a discomfortable, in a situation where we are in discomfort. So, but why should one do this? Like, why should one, put themselves in a situation where they feel the discomfort when they can completely be fine and comfortable and, do things at a much easier level? So, why should they get into an ice bath? Why should they do hatha yoga? Why should they do things that will give hormetic stress to their bodies?
Yeah, it's a great question. Because some people may look at some of the things I do, or other people like Wim Hof do, or blah, blah, anyone who's doing these hormetic practices, as radical or extreme. But we have to remember that our society is a very, very sick society. Like, it's a society of sick people. And if we look at indigenous people, for example, and some of the indigenous cultures around the world, they are already doing the things that we seek out, because we have reached such a level of comfort that the body's ability to adapt has been lost. And we can describe health. One way we can describe health or define health is the body's ability to adapt. And so, for example, if you think of some of the indigenous in the Kalahari Desert who are chasing their prey by outrunning them, so exhausting their prey over, say, like a 2 or 3 day period. And by the way, they're only breathing through the nose as they do this, which is important, which we haven't got to. But you're going to do one thing to change your health: breathe through the nose. If you breathe through the mouth at all, whether you're working out, whether you're sleeping, whatever, just breathe through the nose. But anyway, to get back to the point, so our bodies are designed to chase down deers over 3 days and outrun them. Our bodies are designed to do incredible things, as Wim Hof says, so much more than we've been told we can do. And so it's necessary now, because we've been conditioned in a certain way, which has led to ill health for the majority of the population now, especially in America and the most westernized countries, because of the abundance of materialism. So we have to seek out certain hormetic practices like cold exposure, certain types of breathwork, fasting. We now realize, okay, it's actually a very auspicious time to be alive. We've reached this point in our cultural psychology where we understand that more is not always better. So now we're starting to seek out and use our intelligence. Instead of just going for more, we're going, hold on, if I take stuff away from my body, the inflammation comes down, I start to feel amazing, I start to think clear, and I've got infinite amounts of energy. And it actually all comes down to inflammation at the end of the day. Once the inflammation is not there, the body's it's capable of incredible things. So how do we keep that inflammation down? Well, we put it through certain states of hormesis, and we take away the toxins, and we take away the gluttony. And if we're getting hot, we allow ourselves to get hot without putting on the aircon. And if we're getting cold, we allow ourselves to get cold without putting on the central heating. We give our body a chance to adapt to the external environment and thereby utilize its maximum potential. So that's why we need to readdress our relationship to comfort.
Absolutely. That's an amazing insight. I'll tell you that in terms of discomfort, my experience with it, of what I've observed. So, when you go to the gym, there are two types of people, who want the AC to be on, like on 17, and they want it to be like really cold and then work out, not sweat at all, and then go home, and then there's the set of people who, want to work out in the natural setting and without the air conditioning on. But that is a huge difference. I mean, why are you coming to the gym? Why are you taking your body and putting it through this exercise? It's to become, to get into discomfort, and then you're putting the AC on. You're taking away your body's ability to cool down naturally, and that's one of the things I observe every single time, every single day, that people come and they do this whole thing, this whole routine. It might be amazing, but then they're literally taking away one of the most amazing natural skill that our body has, is to manage temperature on its own. So that's really interesting that you also pointed that out.
Yeah, and it feels so good when you let yourself get a little bit uncomfortable. The body produces all these endogenous hormones and endomorphins and dopamine and blah blah blah, bringing your brain chemistry back into balance. It feels so good. Just let yourself get a little bit uncomfortable, but you have to do it gradually, right? Because it's not like we suddenly just smashed ourselves. No, if we're coming from a place where we're, I don't know, already overweight, and we haven't allowed ourselves to be in any kind of discomfort whatsoever, we have to go gradually, and that's very, very important, whether it's cold exposure or utilizing heat shock proteins for working out in the sun, or whatever your modality is. You have to go gradually and build up slowly.
Absolutely. And coming to that point exactly is, what are some of the most common mistakes that you might have seen people make when it comes to practicing the Wim Hof method, or just breath work called core exposure in particular? Because I mean, there are resources out there, but there's still, without having an instructor with you, there might be some things that you miss out, or you are doing it in the wrong way. So what are some of the things that you've observed happening?
I think the most common mistake is to force oneself through staying in the cold. If you get into the cold and you can't find a way to relax in it, you're just going to stress your nervous system. You're going to exacerbate the sympathetic nervous system. When you get out of the ice bath, you're going to feel stressed for the rest of the day. So it's like pranayama. It's like exercise. If you can, whatever you do it in a relaxed way. Otherwise, don't do it at all. So when you first get into the ice bath, you might be like, of course, you're going to be like, if it's really cold. And actually, that's a very auspicious moment. At that point, you're producing 3 times more dopamine above the baseline. So we want it to be that cold. There is a difference between how cold it is and the effect it has on the physiology. Which was a question I always used to get asked and never had the answer, but actually it was Andrew Huberman that gave me that answer. So shout out to him. But once we've gone past that really cold, we need to relax and really relax the mind. Let yourself melt you want to be like a rag doll, just like really just hanging out in the ice. And that's one of the benefits of not moving, is you can focus on really softening your shoulders, softening your jaw, relaxing your temples, let your brain relax, just being in the cold, feeling the cold. And the more relaxed you are in the ice bath, the better you're going to feel after it. The mistake is to push yourself through. Like, if the ego's there, people are going to want to do longer times and stuff, but what's the point? You've got to find your sweet spot, what works for you. And for me, it's about 3 to 4 minutes, and then I have energy throughout the day. If I try and push myself and I'm going to do 15 minutes, which is useful sometimes if you're wanting to overcome some psychological hurdle. But on the whole, if I did that, I'm going to be tired later on in the day because I've given my body quite a lot to deal with. So try to find the right amount of time for you when you get in the ice bath. So that's one. And then a very common mistake, which shouldn't happen if people know what they're doing, is that they get in a warm shower after the cold exposure. And this is going to cause an after drop. Because when you get into the cold, all the arteries in your extremities close up to protect the core temperature. And if you then get straight into a warm shower afterwards, all the vessels open up and all the cold blood rushes to the core, and you have uncontrollable shaking for a long, long time. It's very, very uncomfortable. So you've got to warm up slowly. In India, it's beautiful. You've got the warm sun. So you can just literally go in the warm sun and just stand and meditate, and feel how the body's physiological processes are. You can watch the arteries open and take your awareness inwards like that. It's a very nice experience. If you're in a cold country, it's a totally different ball game, and you have to warm up very, very consciously with certain movements. So as well, don't think if you've done a 10-minute ice bath in India, it's going to be the same as if you did it in Poland. It's a very, very different experience. So always go gradually if you're in a new environment. I'd say they're the most common thing. It's always when it's coming from the ego, when it's people, I'm going to do more, I'm going to do long, there's no point in that really, is there?
True, there's always this need that, whenever anyone, gets into the Wim Hof method for the first time, and, they've done it for a few weeks, and they see good results with it, or they feel electric, in an ice bath. They always feel this need to stack the time, 1 more minute and 2 more minutes and 3 more minutes. And, that's the aim every time that they get in the ice bath. But that's really an interesting thing that you pointed out. And also, this is a genuine question in terms of the, ice bath and then getting into warm shower. doesn't this sort of give you like a contrast bath therapy benefit? Because like that's what CBT does, that you get into hot and then into a cold a bath, right? So does it give us that benefit, or are we doing it wrong?
No, it's true. If you go into a hot shower, then cold shower, then hot shower, then cold shower, then hot, it can be really good for the immune system. But it depends on the amount of time you're in the cold, right? If you're just going for like 1 minute cold and 1 minute warm, then 1 minute cold and 1 minute warm, that it's a different thing, and it's actually a very good practice to boost the immune system. And same, a sauna appears to have a different effect than warm water after cold exposure. But if you go into really cold ice bath for 3 or 4 minutes and then you jump straight into a hot shower, you're going to get an after drop. So it's about the amount of time you're in the cold before you get into the warm.
Right.
Yeah.
So essentially, if someone is doing this with an intention of CBT, contrast bath therapy,
Yeah.
they should be doing it like, more rounds of it, right? Like just getting once into the ice bath and then going for a hot shower, warm shower is not going to do it, right? If they're doing it for a contrast bath therapy approach.
Yeah, you should do it in smaller intervals, as far as I understand it. So not going so long in the cold and then into the hot. You should do small intervals, changing. So you're going from sympathetic to parasympathetic, from vasodilation to vasoconstriction. So you're exercising all the systems of the body by continuously changing the temperature. So it's a different thing, and it's very useful. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a little tough to do, in your normal setting also though, like because the cold ice bath would get, warm very quickly and then you weren't able to switch that quickly to it. But that is really a genuine question because a lot of people when they get into an ice bath and then they get into a warm shower, they feel like they're doing the contrast bath therapy approach in some way. But yeah, that's true. Just doing it one round of it and, it's not going to help in that way. So that's a great common mistake that you pointed out, and I'm sure it'll help us with the practice.
And you'll also be missing out on the body's when you warm up by yourself. There's a lot of opportunity for beneficial physiological processes like biogenesis of mitochondria, for example. And so it's important to take the time to warm up slowly. Otherwise, you miss out on a lot of benefits.
True.
Yeah.
Understood. And also, now that we're concluding the whole conversation about the Wim Hof method, just for our audience to take away from this, can you like give us a quick summary of it? Like, what are the 5 or 10 steps that a beginner can begin with the cold exposure and the breath work?
Well, in terms of the breath work, you just have to learn the breath work, right? It's very, very simple. It's just controlled hyperventilation followed by exhale retention followed by inhale retention. But if you seek out Bastrika breath or many different modalities of breath work, they tend to follow the same, a very similar pattern anyway. And there's free stuff online to learn. Actually, I have a free course online myself called the Body Sense course. And I teach something similar to the Wim Hof breathing in week 6 in that course. So I can share that with you, and you can put a link. It's just on my website.
Definitely.
And then in terms of cold exposure, you can think of it in 3 parts. The before you get in, which is probably where there's a bit of adrenaline, which is good. And how you're visualizing yourself when you're in the cold. You take that opportunity to like get your game plan together. And so it's going to be, how am I going to breathe? I'm going to stay calm. I'm going to stay relaxed. And it's very important, as I said, if you get in there and you can't relax because of whatever, it's actually a deep subject related to trauma and the nervous system and blah, blah, blah. So if you get in there and you feel like you can't relax, just get out. Don't push yourself through, please. And then try again another time with the game plan very clear, with long exhalations, finding your way how you're going to stay relaxed. And that's part 2 when you're in the ice bath. In through the nose and then long exhalations. Diaphragmatic breathing, intercostal muscle movement in your breathing. And then part 3, which is the most important part, is warming up slowly. And you can use various ways to do that. You could use the posture Utkatasana if you know that posture, or you could do the horse stance, which Wim teaches. And that's the kind of the three parts. So the before, the visualization, the getting in with the slow, long exhalation, staying calm and relaxed, and then getting out and warming up slowly. So it's more important to go with your feeling, what feels good. And, there's no rules and regulations. The method is actually about autonomy. It's about giving power to the individual. So if we start prescribing this and prescribing that, we're actually taking away that power from I'm taking that power away from you by taking your intelligence out of your body and outsourcing it to me. No, I say listen to your own body. Listen to what feels right for you. Go slowly and gradually and experiment with it and see what gives you most energy, what gives you most clarity of mind, and find out for yourself. And be honest and truthful with yourself. Just because Andrew Huberman says, your dopamine levels are increased by this amount, or Wim Hof says, your cardiovascular system is, see if that's true for you. Maybe it's not. Maybe you've got a different journey. So don't outsource your intelligence. Find out for yourself.
Amazing. That was an amazing thought, and I'm sure that our listeners will take that back with them. And this really sums up the whole Wim Hof Method approach. And of course, there's a lot more learning to do. So, we would encourage our listeners to go out, research, and go get the trainer, instructor, train yourself with it, and read more, because there's so much out there also to learn just from the books, or also more podcasts like these. So definitely, don't make decisions based on just one episode, but go and learn more about it, and then, implement that in your life. So thank you for all of these insights. Lastly, I want to know, because in the beginning you mentioned about, how your nutrition, your approach to nutrition has changed over the years. Just to give us a little idea about that, and, how has it been for you, and what are some major changes that were making during this whole transition?
Well, I used to be a plant-based nutritionist, so I used to be on a purely whole food plant-based diet, and that was based on the research that I'd done and studying with Colin Campbell of Cornell University. He did the China study. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but research that suggests if you remove animal protein, you dramatically decrease your chances of cancer and many diseases. And because I was sick, as I mentioned, for quite a few years, that made sense to me and actually helped me a lot. What really helped me was going on the 80-10-10 diet, which is 8% carbohydrate, 10% protein, 10% fat. And basically, it's a fruitarian diet. And it was a temporary thing that I did, but it really helped my body to recover. I tried everything to get over this illness that I'd had, and nothing worked. I was still fatigued. I was still having inflammation in the gut. And then I tried 80-10-10, and it was a struggle for the first couple of weeks. I couldn't digest anything. But then my health just came back. All my energy came back. Everything came back. And that's because mainly, I believe, you're removing toxins. You're removing things that trigger the body's immune system and cause the body to fight itself and causes more inflammation. But now, so now I include a little bit of meat. And the main thing is to avoid sugar and gluten, and then to eat in a time-restricted period. And it really just eat, as Michael Pollan says, just eat real food. Really just keep it simple and avoid anything processed. And if I do that, I tend to feel, really good.
Absolutely. That's some really, a simple approach to go about it, and then also something for listeners to think about. So thank you for sharing that with us. As we conclude the episode today, do you have any last message or thoughts for our audience to leave us with?
just the same thing, really. Like the number one thing really is your breathing. If you can start to investigate how you breathe and try and return yourself to functional breathing, it's the best thing you can do. It's the best thing you can do for your physical and your mental health. Also for longevity, even like lung volume is the greatest indicator we have for how long we're going to live. So yeah, just simply find a way to get your respiration rate down, to get your diaphragm moving nicely, and soften your breathing, and life improves tenfold.
Absolutely. Amazing. That was a lovely message. Thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you for taking out time and being on a podcast today. It was really insightful and a very interesting conversation. I'm sure that our listeners are going to be hooked for this episode. So thank you for sharing all of these details with us. And once again, for the ones who'd like to reach out to Mr. Isaac, we'll find the details in the description below. And definitely check out his retreats. And we hope that we get to have you in India once again soon. I feel like you keep traveling to India, right? Very often.
Yeah, my son was born in India, and yeah, my teachers are in India, and yeah, I just feel I love it there. I love the Indian people. I love the Indian. I mean, not that there's a singular Indian culture, but I love the feeling of being in India. And yeah, super grateful to the beautiful people of your country and everything. It's all the positive, beautiful things it's given into the world. So yeah, I do hope to come back again and again, as much as I can.
Absolutely, and we'll be lucky to host you and to get to be a part of one of your trainings very soon. So thank you so much once again, and it was a lovely episode today.
Thank you so much, actually. Really pleasure to meet you.
That's it for today's episode. I'm Sakshi Pawar, and I'll be your host for the Settle or Be Better podcast. So stay tuned while we bring more inspiring stories your way. You know the drill. Subscribe to the Settle or Be Better podcast, like, share, and comment on our videos. And hit the bell icon because you don't want to miss the mind-boggling health discussions we're about to bring for you. Why settle when you can be better?